All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
designers,
and performers. And John, we're going live in 3.
What's up, everyone? John Gaal here with my friends Ryan, Elanders, and Robert. How you guys doing, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all
So
talk
we're
about each other, but I'm here and to be feared.
Hey, another week corona free, so we good.
All right. And to you guys, Drum Coordination, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you guys are staying safe and staying healthy. As you guys already know, we're trying to do our very best to drop in what you guys know what's up, value bombs on what everything is for drum corps, teaching, writing, when to do what, how to do it, at least from our perspective and our influencers that have helped influence us in our life. We're trying to help you guys and just by creating a space of education. So we were having so much fun last week talking about writing and teaching and just that whole process. We actually decided to make this a two-part series.
I think
Sorry.
it was well worth the wait. Well worth the wait.
Anyway, yeah, Atlanta's makes it funny. That's the thing when you're working with a team you really like. It's not work. You're just having fun, and that's what I get to do all the time with these guys. Yeah, we're going to make this a two-part series because there's a lot of things that we want to keep on talking about that we were just not able to cover in our 20 to 30-minute chunk. And if you guys want an hour session, let us know. We'd be more than happy to just keep talking. But we're going to try to keep it about 30 minutes if we can. But because of that, we're just going to make this a two-part series because we believe there's more valuable information. We just want to just keep on talking about this. So last week, Ryan was talking about, just as from a front ensemble perspective, all the different palettes and opportunities arrangers have. And I was kind of closing the video up with how as musicians, as instructors, as writers, it's extremely important to just make sure that we're doing our due diligence when it comes to just listening to a wide variety of music in the percussion ensemble, in the classical sphere, in the pop genre, in just nature itself, possibly, right? So Ryan actually had brought up a great question after we were done recording that I think I'd love to just start with right off the bat. So Ryan, how about you just take it away, sir?
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit more about and just kind of get everyone's feel for was, your evolution kind of as a writer and as a teacher of when you're doing both, how do you know when to pull the trigger on something where it's like, all right, the kids are ready to do this, the kids aren't ready to do this, okay, it's time to water this. Like, how do you guys know when to make those decisions, not just on a year basis, but also on the basis of like building a program, so almost a multi-year thing as well?
I guess I'll take a stab at that first. I think the thing that I keep in mind is understanding that I am building the same skill sets from year to year. However, I'm building them to a higher degree from year to year. Every kid's going to have to play legatos. Every kid's going to have to play double stroke rolls, paradiddles, permutations, block chords, whatever. But maybe the tempos and the context and the level to which they're playing it will change. So I kind of keep that in mind. And with that, I try to think about what the peak of what I want their skill set to be within that particular year. And I try to set that from the exercise packet and from the go from auditions so that kids know there's going to be a push each year that, okay, we accomplished this last year. We're going to take it another step past that within the following season. So for me, with knowing when to cut things, I think I'll go back to what I said before with the idea that, and I have students understand this, that right out of the gate, you should be able to achieve about 70% of this. If you can't play it at least the 70%, i.e. average level, that means that what I wrote for you is too hard. And that's going to make me reconsider whether or not I feel like this is going to be playable over the season, you know, giving them the rest of the season to accomplish that 20 to 25% of like being absolutely at the peak of what it is that they're doing. So I feel like when I'll talk about, I guess, for more from an indoor standpoint, I feel like I always shoot for being in that 70-ish range at that first show, you know, so that we know, okay, we're at a good place. This is where we want to go. You know, now this is how much time we have to get there. And I think that really the end kind of determines that line, like you said before, as to like, when should I water this, or when should I fix this, or is this one of those years where I should just let them, you know, try to accomplish the part as best they can, because this is a growing year and we're not trying to be super competitive. So it's more about their growth as a group. Like, I think that that's kind of a circumstantial thing. I think that when you get there, a lot of times your first year, it's like, hey, just make sure nothing blows up. You know, if it's, you know, fall marching band, make sure everybody gets ones and everybody's happy. You know, your first indoor year, make sure if you can get them close to getting a medal, winning some shows, you know, make sure everything gets on and gets off the floor and the kids look good, parents have a good experience. You know, that's kind of what that year is about. And as you go forward, as the education grows, your education grows as an instructor, your level of accuracy as to teaching what you're doing, like as that grows, like then your competitive, you know, ability should grow like that. And hopefully the kids, you know, latch on to that.
I really like what Rob was saying in terms of the longer that you do it, the more you get attuned to what it is that you're doing as you're writing and building from year to year based on the program and the season that you're in, whether it's indoor versus outdoor. So I've always had an interesting experience with the shows that I've written, because somewhere along my career, I got roped into writing drill as well as writing the book. So that started changing how I approached writing music, because I was no longer solely focused on just what the book had to offer, but I also started thinking about, okay, how can I integrate what I'm writing into what I'm going to write visually on the floor? So then sometimes the musical idea was reverse engineered from the visual idea from the start, and then vice versa in the show. So that also started to change how I thought about things. And even now, writing for drum corps, I will think about certain visual aesthetics in terms of show design, and then how can what they're going to play, how will that be performed later on? And then that started to alter some of my writing as well, in terms of, you know, I can think of at least 4 moments in the 2019 show where I thought about visually what the battery would be doing before I even wrote a note on the page. And then once I started writing, it was like, okay, yeah, this is going to go with this body here, this body here, this body here. And even though it's drum corps, you know, it's not indoor and you can't see it up close, but, you know, I could feel what they would be doing, even just drumming through the music. Like, this is going to feel good here. This is going to feel good here. And then that started bringing in new ideas of what I wanted to write inside that particular moment. So, you know, I think there is a lot of functional outside things that start to affect you the longer that you write, whether it's I'm attuned to writing for the area. My high school is the Rockets and everything that we do is a space show. You know what I mean? So it's like you have like these little ticks that will always start to influence like how you do things, because everybody's kind of experienced like that influence that comes from different places. And I thoroughly enjoy the fact that, you know, as you do it longer, you get attuned to your students, how they interact, how they behave, and you almost start to predict what they like. And you, even though they're growing as performers, you're growing along with them. And, as soon as you hand out that packet or hand out that book, man, I'm really going to dig this. This is a little remix on what you did last year. Man, that's so dope. It kind of changes from year to year, but there's always like these little influences that come along the way that I think just help you grow as a designer, as you continue to write.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it just takes time, right? Right now, your question, Ryan, I would say that's someone who's been teaching for between 5 to 10 years, right? It's going to take 5 years. If you're just getting started, it's going to take you 5 years to create a culture within your program, whether it's the high school, middle school level, or professionally in a drum corps situation. Right? Like Elanders and I have been teaching at Southwind for the last 5 years. Ryan and Rob, I think you guys have been teaching the last 3 or 4 years with us. But we are now just starting to see the fruits of our labor, right? Because the first few years that we started, it was survival. It wasn't survival in the sense that we don't know what we're doing. It was more of survival of how can we put everything together and stay afloat, right? And so I think like even this conversation is multi-tiered, right? Let's take this application to you're just starting out and the school you're starting with doesn't have a strong financial band booster situation or the culture isn't established. Right, you can't even think about the cool hybrid rudiments, cheese each other's off the left hand with your right eye closed, things like that top 5 world-class drum corps are doing. You're just trying to focus on survival. Can I get kids coming in day after day, interested in music, wanting the drum, willing to learn, right? And that's with or without a feeder program. Right, so that's a 2 issue right there. So you first just have to establish a strong culture, and we can maybe after I'm done talking, we can move the conversation in that direction. This part 2 series is a little bit more fluid. We don't have so much of every question written down of what exactly we want to talk about, so I'll leave it up to the rest of the guys. Continuing that, in the first tier, you just have to figure out the culture. Parental support, making sure you have a strong band booster program, or if you don't have one, create one. And then getting the principal and the admin team on your side, right? Willing to work with them. What are their goals? 3 to 5 years. How can you help them? Because at the end of the day, if you're providing value for people and helping people are going to respond to you more positively, right? People enjoy help, especially when it's free, right? So anything that you can do to help your students, the parents, the admin, is always going to pay dividends in the long term. That being said, it's going to be a lot more work, right? From a time standpoint and from a family relationship standpoint. And that's even another conversation we could talk about is the, I don't want to say stereotypes, but the type of person that it takes and the struggles, whether you're single or married, have kids or all that. So boom, I'm just like listing things we can talk about. So I hope someone's writing this down because I'm going to forget.
I'm interested to get everyone's opinion on what you just said, because one of the things that I do see that there seems to be a disparity in is there seems to be a lot of people that I see from an instructor standpoint that just kind of moan about things not being a certain way, or your school doesn't have this, or this school doesn't have this culture or doesn't have this. And it's like, well, you're the one that's there. You're going to have to build it. Like, it's not going to just magically arrive. You know what I mean? We're going to have to do the work. And one of the things that I felt like this past year of like WGI really, I guess, kind of challenged me as an instructor was to be present in everything and to really live in the moment, because there's a lot of times as instructors, we preach a lot of stuff to our students that we don't really live up to. Like, we're telling the kids, we need you to work harder than you did last year. But, like, does the warm-up packet look like you worked harder? Is the way that you're explaining the information look like you worked harder as an instructor? You know what I mean? Is the show design and, like, the quality that you're giving us, does it say that you actually worked harder? Like, am I more excited about, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like as a young instructor and as people that are, like, kind of trying to build something, a lot of times we can point to, like, this group or that group or whatever, and we can say, oh, our kids need to be like that group, or our band program needs to be like that group. But it's like, are we putting in the work that those people put in to build that culture? Like, how do y'all feel about that pathway of trying to do that?
Well, I'm gonna jump in and talk a little bit about my new current situation, because it kind of tags along with what you and John were talking about. So I started teaching in 2005, and I just took over another program this past school year. So the 2019-2020 year was my first year at this new program. And the last program I was at, I was there for 6 years. I had a WGI concert group that went to finals 4 out of 5 years that we went. We medaled. We were top 4 for 3 of those 4 times that we made finals. We were doing a lot of really good things, and I had kind of inherited that program a little bit in pretty good shape, but then was able to mold it into what I felt like it should be for the kids and whatnot, to give them the best educational experience. So then fast forward now to I'm taking over this new program. The booster program is really, really incredible at the new school. And the school's 3 years old, so it's pretty brand new program. But the foundational training has not been there. So like day one, I'm walking into a new side of the state. I don't have staff. I'm teaching the battery for the first time. I'm like, all right, let's just see what you guys got on triplet rolls. I mean, there was nothing, and there were a lot of different things.
Right.
And it was, I walked into a program where I don't know what the previous training was like, but I know that they held their previous instructional team in pretty high esteem. So my goal was to try to change the culture, change what their expectation of themselves was in the first year, and get them to understand that, like, yeah, you're good, but like there's different levels of good out there, and trying to change that. And I think, as you know, and I'm going to say young instructors, and I'm going to have to include myself in that, I had been teaching for 15 years, but I was taking over a new program for the first time with like relatively untrained students or unrefined students, whereas you got to be really, really patient in that situation. And chances are it's not going to be as good as you want it to be. Like, I look back at that marching band season last year and I go, man, the growth that those kids made from the beginning of the season to the end of the season was probably the most I've seen out of any high school group that I've taught. Again, we went from like, the kids had no concept of how to play triplet rolls, spending the entire summer just playing 2-count triplet roll checks on like the move all the time, to them getting to the end of the season being like, hey, that kind of sounds like a triplet roll.
Yeah, nice.
Right. And then watching them go into, because I do work in the school district as well. I'm in the school 3 days a week. So I get to see the middle school kids and the growth that they've made, and the high school kids and the growth that they've made in their concert bands. But the biggest thing I can say when you're first starting to like figure out the culture is you got to be patient, because I went from, the new school has a concert program too, a WGI concert program. So I went from a WGI like finalist, medalist caliber group to a group that had no intentions of working on exercises. Luckily, their concert program was really good. So like my top kids knew all 12 major scales. They knew all 12 minor scales. My top band can play all their melodic scales. And I taught them in the first quarter, I taught them all the modes. So like Lydian, Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian. I was able to teach them all those in one semester's worth of time, because those kids were musically very, very intelligent. They just didn't really have any interest in like refinement. And once I kind of figured that out, my first year, this past year, kind of got geared towards that. Like, what can we do? What can I do to make it musically interesting for them, but still get them at times to get their technical facilities heightened, you know? And I think the first time the kids really saw the dividends of that was at our indoor season. We went out for our first show, and I thought the kids played really, really well. And, you know, their score was, you know, a 64 or something like that, which is in Ohio, a fairly typical, you know, first week out score, you know. And then we went out the very next week, and we put on a whole nother minute of music and spent a little bit of time just working some like hand speed skills and like 16 timing stuff. And they had a better run, and they saw their score increase 9 points in a week. And I think that was one of the turning points, at least I saw in the kids, of that. Not only like did they feel like they were more successful, but they were recognized for it. You know, and I think that's where the culture started to turn, you know. And then unfortunately, that was the second week in the competitive season, and our season laid out really weird. So that was our second week, and then we had a bunch of time off, and then Corona said, "You're done." Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that work come to fruition competitively, but we got to finish the show as much as we could. I got a video of it. I shared it with the kids, and we just spent a bunch of time talking about, look at the progress you've made. Like the first day, some of you knew all your major scales. Some of you didn't know where C was on the keyboard, you know, like kids not wanting to participate in the first couple rehearsals because they, you know, the new guy might not we have a new guy, and it's scary that we have a new guy and it's different. And then, you know, they go into the end and they're like, thank you so much for everything that you've done for us, you know. And now that we're getting on to year 2, you know, the shift for me has really been from a leadership standpoint. Like, how do we get the kids to understand, like, I'm the instructor, but this is your program. And the thing that I'm starting with them now is, what is the legacy that you want to leave, especially starting with my leadership team? What do you want this program to look like? Now, I have to have my say. We can't just look like what you want it to look like. But with my guidance, we can take your image and my image, and we can find something that will inevitably be what we're both looking for with some molding. You know, but getting them to understand that, like, yes, you've done it this way, and yes, you've experienced some success this way, and I've done it this way, and I've experienced success this way. Let's work together to find the best path. So it's kind of, I'm taking the route, and I've never done this before because I inherited a lot of my programs from like either nothing and the kids were a complete blank slate, or from something that was previously there. But it's more now like, we've got to mold this thing together, because if I try to go just how I want it to be, I'm going to lose students. You know, like, every student learns differently, and every student is you know, sympathetic to different things and empathetic to different things. So it's irresponsible of me as a teacher to just say, screw it, we're doing what I want. But it's also irresponsible of me as a teacher to go, all right, boys and girls, what would you like to do? Because if you do that, I mean, you're never going to get anything done. And I've been in rehearsals of programs where it's like, I walk in and everyone's like, all right, what do you guys want to do today?
What?
Yeah, no. What's the plan for today? And that's one of the things I'll say right now, as somebody that's going around doing more consulting now, and I'm sure you guys can speak to this. I go into a lot of places consulting where I write the book or whatever, and I go in and everyone's like, all right, what do you want to do? No. I wrote the book, but I'm here to help you. Like, you tell me what you want me to do. Because that's the best use of your time if you have a consultant in a program. You know, if it's marching band, indoor drumline, or just somebody looking at it programmatically. But letting them know what you want from them versus, you wrote the book, just do whatever you want. Because whatever I want, like, my teaching philosophy is not the same as everybody else's. You know, like, I go into some programs and it's all about like feel and technique and all of that. And as a young instructor, I was the same way. But now that I'm a little bit of an old fart, like, listen more.
Yeah.
You know, I do a lot more listening with my groups now and teaching them to use their ears, and I don't not focus on their hands, but if they don't know what they're trying to create from an aural standpoint, they're never going to do it from a physical standpoint.
Yes. Agreed.
So,
I like that.
yeah, so that's the hardest part when you have somebody come in as a consultant. If your teaching philosophies don't line up exactly, and you just go, all right, do your thing. My thing's different, and I'm going to do my thing, but don't get upset when you feel like we just wasted 2 hours.
Right.
You know, so I think it's all about, you know, and I think that might be a little off topic from the culture, but to bring it back, I think it's, you have to have an idea of what you want the direction to be, and then everybody has to be on board to that direction. And everyone can have influence, but it's all got to be, we've all got to be moving down the same track together. Otherwise, you're not moving.
I like what you're talking about in two segments, Ryan. The first one of what you ended with, which was about kind of like a give and take in terms of, you know, I've given you this product, and what I want you to take from me is whatever information you want me to give on something specific within your realm. Because ultimately I'm going to leave, and then you got to deal with all this. So don't put all that weight on me to come in and fix the world in 2 hours, more so than what tidbit can I give you in that chunk of time. And I thoroughly believe, like, especially from a consulting standpoint, you know, even if you get one piece of information to that group and you're relatively quiet, that one tidbit could be just the peak, you know, that needed to go in that rehearsal in that moment to kind of fill that gap space that maybe they were missing, you know, through whatever they were learning. So I definitely feel that. To cycle back to what we were talking about with culture, because I think there's a lot of different concepts about culture and what exactly that means, whether that's all my students show up with hats on and we all wear the same rehearsal gear every day. Like, that's one concept of culture. And then maybe your culture is my students have a requirement to practice this amount every single day. And we hold each other accountable through text message, you know, check-ins at the beginning of rehearsal. Did you get your practice time in today? So one thing that I started way back when, I say way back when, you know, like I'm old, I'm young, but I was fortunate enough to start teaching like right out of high school. So I was young enough to fumble and make a lot of mistakes and still come out on the front side of my 20s after probably teaching poorly for like 5 or 6 years. So I'm blessed to say that. But it was like one of those things that I decided on was, okay, in order for students to get better, they've got to commit to a certain amount of practice. So if it doesn't kill me, I'm going to tell them to practice 15 minutes a day every single day that I see them. I need 15 minutes a day from every single body in this ensemble. Hella high water, snow or hurricane, 15 minutes a day. If that's the minimum that you can give me, fantastic. If you can give me more, that's what I want. But at least 15 maintains our maintenance level so that we can rehearse when we need to rehearse. Some people did not take that advice and they suffered in rehearsal because of it, because you could start to tell who was doing those maintenance check-ins and who was not. And because we had built that culture, you would see other kids calling other kids out like, yo, you didn't practice that lick, because if you did, it wouldn't sound so bad right now. You know what I mean? Like, and that's probably one of the greatest feelings I could feel as an instructor, when another student looks over at another kid, they know they haven't practiced. And when we go through those down the lines, they're just like, yeah, I knew you were having trouble on that lick when you started working on it 5 minutes before rehearsal started because you didn't break it down at home. And that's one of those things to where, like, that can be your culture. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, we name all the exercises after canines because we're the dogs at our school. You know what I mean? Like, it can be anything that connects the students to a central idea of this is how we want to get better with our shared experience. And I think that's what it comes down to when we're talking about culture. We're talking about what sums up our shared experience and how do we experience all of this together. And I think if you can conceptualize and keep that through line for the entire duration that you're with a group, then that's what starts to create an identity that so many WGI judges talk about when you're talking about judging a group. And man, this group is experiencing an identity. The reason why they're experiencing an identity is because they all have forward motion with a shared experience concept that ties them together. Whether it's we always show up to rehearsal 5 minutes in advance to pull the floor so that we're ready, or we always call each other on the weekends to check in, or we always go eat before a big rehearsal, regional, whatever it is that creates that shared experience and puts all those students and the instructors on the same level in terms of connection, then I think that's what really breathes life into that culture and creates the identity for that group. And it's a beautiful thing because at that point, your group becomes unbreakable, whether they win or lose. You can be the most successful group in the world. If you don't have a culture and identity, those kids will not remember that moment for anything in the world. They'll just remember long rehearsals where people yelled at them that didn't care. But if you have that shared experience, they're going to share in the good and share in the bad, and they're more likely to pick each other up when they have those tough moments. And I think that's one of the things that I love about drum corps is that it kind of forces you into that shared experience, unlike high school sometimes, because, you leave a high school rehearsal and then you head to the house. You get to see your friends. You get to see your other friends that may or not in band, etc. Everybody had a pack of friends that they hung out with in band and then a pack of friends that they hung out with that were not in band. You know what I mean? Like mine was my cousins. They were not in band, but we hung out on the weekends. And then I had all my band friends. So it's like everyone goes through that. But like with the drum corps experience, because everyone's forced into this shared experience, we all kind of go through those ups and downs together. And that's the beauty of it that makes it very unique, but also allows us to interweave even more into that ensemble because we know that they're going to live it and breathe it together and they're going to pick each other up, whether we're having a really tough day at rehearsal or we're having one of the best rehearsals that we've ever had.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, let's keep continuing that conversation. So if you're a new instructor, the first 5 years of you either building a program or like from the ground up, like what we did with Southwind, or if you are inheriting a program and then creating your vibe, that I think that we need to keep that at the forefront of our mind, that culture is all about shared experiences. One group that I teach here in DFW is we don't have a feeder program, no middle school, right? So I see the kids fresh as freshmen, and I only have 4 years with them. Right. And so being able to create as a new instructor with them, with new people every year, creating that culture of shared experiences, I think it's extremely important, especially if you're working just by yourself, to lean on some of that student leadership. Right. I think John Maxwell talks about in his book, I don't remember the book, I'm sorry. But you just Google his name. He's got some famous book.
Something about the principles of leadership. I think you sent me that book, John, or told
That's
me to buy
it. Yeah. See, you even know better than I do. I just gotta find it. I have it underlined somewhere. But he talks about like finding your support team in the sense of like students or kids that just have that maybe that go-to attitude that can get the job done that you're requiring. Like when you're talking about culture and shared experiences, one that I like to share is I like to have a clean environment that students can rehearse in and students can come to all the time. Because if you're organized and clean, that will transcend, or I guess translate to an efficient rehearsal, right? And so if you have that kid that just they'll always do what you'll say. They love you down to the bone. Then maybe that's that support team that you need. Whereas some students, maybe they're not that go-getter, but they have more of that emotional support connection, that they know how to relate more to maybe the younger students. So as a new instructor for any group, in creating that culture, I think it's extremely important to find those upperclassmen that you can really connect with. Relatability, I'm finding with students now, and I teach in the inner city schools a lot, being able to connect with the younger students, and even at the middle school or the high school, with concept that they already understand, with sports or books or subjects that they have a firm grasp on. From a teaching perspective, it like the learning curve just skyrockets so fast. And let me take a step back. When you're creating everything, like I said before, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take at least 5 years, okay? To, again, skyrocket that, to increase the curve, the efficiency, finding that support group of the students and creating that relatable space, that's going to help you create your culture a lot faster. That's at least what I think.
Yeah.
So that's the first 5 years that we were talking about. And it's okay to fail. I've been listening to what Ryan and Landers and Ross been saying, and even myself, we all figure it out, kind of. As a musician, you have to be okay, even just a person in life, you have to be okay with just not knowing everything right off the bat. And number two, just learning. You're always going to be a student your entire life. Whether that's going to be, whether that's going to be in the music field, or tax season, or online learning because of this new way of lifestyle. Like, we all have to adapt as musicians, as instructors, as students, and you're always just going to be learning. And it's cool, going back to that support team, not only from a student perspective, but having mentors, people that you relate to, that you can look up to, that you can call and be like, hey, I'm really having trouble teaching triplet rolls. Ryan, help me out, buddy. Right? Like having those connections. And the best way to create those connections is to be a part of the activity, right? That's why, like, people speak so highly of drum corps, because of the experiences they get, but also more important because of the friendships that they create, right? Being a part of that atmosphere in drum corps, in college, in bands, creating that shared experience is extremely important. So being able to find people that you can relate to, and you just take a little bit of information from here and there, and then you create your own identity with your culture. And some years it's going to be great. Other years you're going to get some students that are not going to understand anything you're talking about, no matter how many different angles you go at it, right? And so some years you're going to, quote unquote, fail in maybe some of your goals, and that's totally fine. So I want to transition. We've been talking a little bit about the 5-year, the beginner, early instructor, and now I want to transition back to that very first conversation that we were having. And I'm already looking at the clock, and we're already running out of time again.
Hey, real quick, the biggest thing to take away from your failures is to learn from them. I just want to put that out there. Like, failing is failing only if you don't learn from it. So, like, if you're in your first 5 years and you're like, man, this season did not go well, just evaluate that for a second. You know, not to get off topic and to take us back to that, but I just wanted to say that for, like, instructors that are going, well, I failed. No, just learn from it and then make sure you don't do that mistake again.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's extremely important. Rob, you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with Ryan on that 100%. I mean, just continue. One of the other things that I took from you was staying a student. You know what I mean? I think that our students pick up on that more than we think that we do, than we think that they do. But I think that our students take a lot of that culture from us, of, like, just staying a student, always being a person not afraid to ask a question, not afraid to take risk, and even be honest when you don't know something as an instructor and you're growing in an area. I think that students are, they're willing to be respectful of that if they see that you're giving every single thing that you have, and that's a growth opportunity for you and for them.
And just like, remember, guys, percussion is large, right? Like, even if you focus on one specific instrument, like for me, it was marimba. And I got to be a really good marimba player when I played in drum corps, and I went to music education and did all that. But if you're going to teach, especially if you're going to be a band director, you're eventually going to have to learn how to teach marching skills. You're going to have to learn the battery. And you have bass drums, cymbals, snare drums, quads. You have the flub line if you have the opportunity to have a flubs. And that's just the battery. Just think about even the front ensemble: marimbas, vibraphones, auxiliary percussion, electronics, right? I mean, it is so vast, and it can definitely be overwhelming with how much information you have to know. And I guess the expectation that people have of you and you have of yourself as a new instructor. So it's okay to fail, because as long as you are, like what Ryan said, you are learning from those failures or those missed opportunities, I guess you could say, if you want to put it in more positive light, it'll be fine. So transitioning from the beginner instructor, first 5 years, now let's say you've been doing this for 5 to 10 years or whatnot. Now you don't have to really work so much about the culture. Now we can focus in a little bit more on, I guess, the retention. So how about, do you guys have anything you want to say about, now we don't have to focus so much on creating that culture and just trying to get a kid to show up to rehearsal. Now we have the culture established. How do we start adjusting the packet to fit those skill sets or other things? And the reason I want to bring this up, because a few years ago, everyone, especially in the battery, they line up in the drum corps, they play their bass with the metronome, they play their exercises, they play their show chunks, they go, right? And then Roger Carter came on, started playing the drum set with the Blue Coats, and now drum corps, to a certain effect, if you have this opportunity, has turned a corner, and now a little bit more groove bass, a little bit more flow. Kids want to do a little bit more style instead of the fundamentals. Do you think instructors who've been teaching, and I'm just going to say 5 to 10 years, because I'm going to say the first 5 years you're just focusing on creating that, is that something that every instructor should do? Should they kind of go explore and create their own educational pathway, or should they stick to what they know what's best for them?
It's funny.
Elanders, I saw that mic came off mute, so I played. Elanders ready to light this up.
Okay, and the reason why this is funny is because I just text Rob about this like 2 days ago. We were talking about how there has been a shift in DCI in terms of how things are done. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's the military background that came with it. And for so much of it, I brought up an example of 2001 Vanguard. They had the Vic First in the lot video, and you could see them playing. And I noticed how very starkly straight and rigid that everything that they did, even in their closer, it was so like professional and just straight down the line. But you could parry that with just the next season of WGI, 2002, and you could see the same players in a WGI video where everything was like up, and it's like, why was there such a difference with those players doing the DCI gig versus the WGI gig? Same players within a matter of 9 months of each other, but two totally different interpretations of how we drum, right? So what we've started to see that shift is how that segment of the activity, WGI, Bands of America, whatever you want to call it, started to filter its way into DCI to say, this is not the military. It doesn't have to be as strictly rigid as it was before. You can kind of get outside of that box and create whatever fresh perspective that you want, you know what I mean? So I think that shift was because we started to see more players doing more and kind of sharing those experiences and saying, you know, I marched with this group. I'm going to bring a little bit of this here. I'm going to bring a little, I call them the core hoppers, the ones that do like a different core every year. So you start intermingling all this stuff. And now you've got this beautiful new activity that maybe somebody from that marched drum corps in the 70s doesn't recognize drum corps anymore because it's not what it used to be. And yeah, it still has the same roots and foundation, but it's so different. So does the amount of time that somebody's teaching cause you to do that shift, or are you following the trend of the activity? I think it really depends on how comfortable the person is. Because I think when we first started at Southwind, I taught that group in the same vein that I taught every first year group that I taught. You're going to know the fundamentals, you're going to know the basics, and you're not going to move a muscle until you have all of that. It's not that they didn't want to do it. It's just the fact that I had to have a certain level of trust with them in order to give them those keys. So it's kind of like a teenager. And I've got a 5-year-old that's turning 15, and she ain't getting the keys to that car until I know for certain she knows where her blinkers are, she knows how to turn the lights on, et cetera, et cetera. So I use that analogy as you kind of start growing from a first through 5-year instructor to a 5 through 10-year instructor. What kind of level of trust do you now have with your students to where you can start letting them insert their bits and pieces inside of that culture a little bit more on maybe the outside of what's going on? Because, you know, the last school that I taught for 9 years. The first 3 years was here. Year 3 through 6, I gave them a little bit more, you know, breath to really impact. And I will say by those last 3, they were deeply interwoven in what we did, because I had a level of trust with those students and they had a level of trust with me to know if he's saying something, this is important, this is the way that we have to do it in order for us to grow here. But they also knew that I had enough respect for them to listen to their ideas, see how it can benefit our program, and then we would run with it. So that mutual level of trust, I think, is what really determines how much you can do in that second segment of teaching from year 5 through 10. And whether or not you have that with those students. So it may not be the instructor, you know, I've been teaching for 10 years, but I don't do something different that, you know, year 5 through 10 versus I've been teaching with a certain school for 10 years, right? So I feel like I've always had to start back at my year 1 version of Elanders. For every, you know, group that I've gone and taught, it's like, yo, you get in 2004 E, not 2012, even though it's now 2013, right? Like, you got to get me from the basics so that you can learn what I'm about and what I think is important in order for you to get better as a musician, but also to get better as an individual, because it's twofold. You can be a great musician, but I don't want you to be a crappy person. You've got to be both. You got to be an outstanding student. You got to have that character mold. And then I want you to also become a great musician. It takes discipline and it takes consistency. And if you have those two things built inside of whatever it is that you decide to do, I think that's what's going to keep your program flourishing and also going to allow you to share those experiences with others.
Yeah, just to what you just said, I 100% agree with that. I think the deciding factor is, why are you doing this? Why are you making a change? Are you making a change to be trendy, or are you making a change to facilitate a new skill set? So for instance, like you said, if your show calls for like okay, let's take for example, there would be no reason for the Santa Clara Vanguard, as we currently know them with Paul Rennick, to warm up like the Blue Knights when Mike Jackson was there, because the skill set within the show Paul Rennick never has his students to play, solos and people to come in and out of the tapestry and do all this other kinds of weird stuff. It's very ensemble based. And he's successful doing that because that's his particular approach. So even though his students are able, I'm sure, to do anything that any of the other top drum corps are able to do from a soloistic standpoint, that particular approach to the warm-up program does not fit his style of music design and the way that he approaches the music. So I feel like from an instructional standpoint and as a director, you need to make sure that the warm-up program and how you approach the music is always congruent with your aspect of how you want your students to perform. Now, I will say within those first 5 years, you probably would focus on things a little bit more from a full ensemble standpoint, very strict exercises. Like one of the things that I agree with that I feel that I use within those first 5 years of students is I don't allow exercises to be very long. I don't allow them to be like super long and complicated. I use short exercises with 50,000 variations, which is a lot more like Paul Rennick's, his seems to be his style is very practical. I'm going to play 8 on a hand, but I'm going to play an 8 on a hand bucks. I'm going to play a triplet accent tap. I'm going to do it with huckadicks. I'm going to do it with this, do it with that. Start on the left hand, start on the right hand, play it backwards, 4-2-1, whatever. Just keep it super simple because the students need that scientific side of what we're doing. But I also feel like as an instructor, like he said, the further you go along, the more you can kind of dangle the carrot at the end of the tunnel of, okay, if you guys master this science part of it, I'm going to, as you grow, I'm going to allow you to start to do more things that can build the skill set that we're going to need for where we're going. So say, for instance, as your ensemble grows, you may like for students to be able to have their own input, maybe do solos and different things like that. So that I use that as a reward for students that, okay, hey, once we understand this timing aspect of how we do these things, and you guys can play all these exercises at this level, at this tempo, then okay, we're going to add a flam jam at the beginning before we go into eights. And they're excited about it. It's like, okay, I want to do this. Like, I really want to get this flam jam. So we got to make sure that we're able to do X, Y, and Z. Or, okay, by this time, I want you guys to, growing again as a musician, I want you to come up with a 2-bar solo before the flam jam, before you stack into whatever else is happening. Now, obviously, that's a lot more advanced. But again, this is dangling the carrot at the end of the tunnel for the kid to say, okay, I think that I can do that. That's cool. I see that with it reflected within the culture. Like, I need to master these basic things so that I can get there. So for me, it's all about making sure that you are driving or allowing the students to grow in the direction that you feel like is best for the program, and making sure that you are helping the students and partnering with them on that trajectory that, okay, I don't want you to just be able to play in an ensemble and, individual things like that. If you want to go to the next level, you want to go to drum corps, they may have you play something by yourself. They may have you play something in a pair with another person. It's the same reason why I explain to my students why I teach traditional grip on snare drum. There are a lot of people that feel like, well, you shouldn't teach traditional grip, like just teach them match grip. But there's a lot of benefits to that. Like, it's the same thing that you're going to do if you do a shake roll with a tambourine. You're going to use the same type of a thing. Like, you're turning your wrist in the same way. And my biggest thing behind that is what I tell my students is that I don't want you to just be successful in high school. I want you to be able to be successful on a marching snare drum should you go somewhere else. So for me and my own personal philosophy, I feel like it's a little selfish of me to teach you match grip just because I feel like this is all that you can do within a high school context. That kind of means for me that this is the only place that I plan on you being a musician. I want you to be in a a place where should you decide to go on to WGI, college marching band, whatever, like you have the tools to do that. So again, just kind of, digressing back to the point, it's making sure that what you're doing is not just following a trend, but making sure that it's facilitating the skill set that you want your students to have, whether that be soloistic in nature or being able to handle 2 bars by themselves or whatever. Like, you can't just do it for artistic reasons of, I want it to look cool or whatever, I want to be on a lot video, doing stick tricks and you freaking drop the stick. Like, why? Like, no, like you need to be doing this because like you want to have the skill set and those nails to be like, I nailed it. Like, I know what I'm able to do and I can master those things. So.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the trends and whatnot, you always have to keep in mind that, as you're in your first couple of years and you're building that culture, you're building your culture with a sense of personality. Like, culture is not just show up, play clean. That's your job as a person in band. That's what you should do. You show up to rehearsal on time. You play the drums together. You play the right notes. You play the dynamics. You're doing everything every other kid on planet Earth is doing when it comes to band.
Should be doing.
Good.
Should be doing. Yes.
But as you're establishing that culture, you're inputting your personality and the group's personality into the culture that you're establishing. So to say that once you hit year 6, you see, somebody out front playing a drum set, whether it's Roger Carter or whoever playing a drum set out in front, doesn't mean that you should, because that's maybe not the personality of your group, because I think back to like when I marched and when I taught drum corps, like Blue Coats kind of always had that little bit of not a loose vibe, but a less militaristic vibe. So it was just a natural evolution of Roger going from they're playing groove exercises over a soundtrack to now they're just playing over Roger playing beats. It's like a natural progression because that was the culture that they had established. Whereas like if you wouldn't see Vanguard play with a drum set player in front of them because that's not the culture they have established. And just taking other groups, for example, and at the high school level, you've got to keep in mind what you're trying to establish, because the kids are going to look, as soon as you start to follow a trend and don't tell the kids, they're going to be like, wait a minute, we just spent the last 5 years getting our butts kicked on how to play eights good, and now we're like going to play West Coast style and like flop our hands all over the place and that kind of stuff. Whereas the last 5 years, you were like, put your hands down, turn the wrist, hit the drum. Okay, the next step
Not saying West Coast doesn't do that.
No. But the next step of like put your hands down, hit the drum is like sound quality and matching and blending. It's not like flow. I think you have to take the natural progression of things, and maybe it is for some different people, but I think you've got to just keep down a natural progression instead of following trends. I've been very, I don't want to say stuck in my ways, because I've changed a lot of things about the way I teach, and I change my warm-ups every so often and whatnot. But it's almost, I view the warm-ups as like the skill builders. For me, everything is pretty short, and it's based on building a skill that can then be flushed out into a pit tune or into something like that. And I think that's what Robert and Elanders are saying too, of having the short exercises and then flushing those out into, the flam jam, and then taking the flam jam and building it into the snare feature of the show. So I think you've always got to be moving the program. And again, I said this when we were talking about building the culture, and I think it's after you've established the culture that you have a goal in mind. And I don't think that once the culture is established that the goal necessarily changes. I think the path just becomes more narrow to the goal. Because when you're establishing the culture, you're like, all right, we got to hit the drums together. We got to kind of hopefully play clean, maybe one day, and then we got to make sure everyone's on the correct foot, and we got to do all these things. And then once we've got that established, we're like, all right, all roads lead to here now.
I think also at the end of the day, you just gotta know your students, guys and
Absolutely.
girls, right? I'll throw my 2 cents with Robert. He was talking about traditional grip. So I don't teach traditional grip for my kids. Not that I can't, but I just know that my kids, the school that I teach at, is more of a magnet school. So the kids, when they go there, again, this is a school that doesn't have a feeder program. So I'm starting from scratch for freshmen. I got 4 years to teach them. If a kid goes above and beyond everything I'm showing them already in band rehearsals and the spring season percussion ensemble or indoor, if I see that they're going above beyond and they're using their own time and seeking that information, I'm more than willing to give them those tools of traditional grip to benefit them if they want to go down the road in college. And for a front ensemble perspective, I teach Stevens technique. And if they want to learn a little bit more about jazz vibraphone or who Gary Burton is, then I teach them the Burton grip, right? But for the kids that I teach, I don't have the luxury to be able to teach traditional grip because in my perspective, match grip is more, I don't want to say universal, but you can transition it from one instrument to another easier. So for the limited amount of time that I have and the students that are going to my school more to be doctors or technicians or things, that music's not really their highest priority. And the culture I've established, it's still in the works because I've just started working at the school. It's traditional grip isn't up there right now. So I think being able to know your students and where they're at and knowing who's a go-getter and who's just there for the culture experience, you have to be flexible.
I think I would just tag in there, always be learning. Whether you're a student or an instructor, just always be learning. It's very easy to get wrapped up in what you're doing. I taught a couple of years of world-class drum corps before I came on board with Southwind. And it could have been very easy for me to go, well, I've already done this at the top 15 level. But I've learned so much from the 3 other gentlemen on this call that they've changed the way that I've taught in the last couple of years. You just always got to put yourself in that situation because you never know who you're going to learn from. I teach with people younger than me all the time, and I'm always learning from them about their experience because I don't have their experience behind the instrument in this activity, but I'm always learning. I think we're always learning. We're always revamping our packet and our processes to make sure that we're facilitating the students' growth in the best possible way. So, always be learning.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I think for those that are viewing, hopefully you see our love and our passion for each other and for the music field. So again, we're following on this train during this kind of quarantine limbo summer idea of just providing as much valuable content as we can. And the way to help us provide more content for you guys is if you email us and if you ask us questions. So we're going to be leaving some links below at the end of this video. Just email us anytime. Over there, up there. But we love hearing from you guys. But for some of these upcoming videos that we have, we're going to keep it fluid and flexible. But we do have some more questions that we'd like and some topics we'd like to talk about. But thank you again to everyone who stayed this far and watched everything that we've done. And I guess we'll see you guys in the next video. All right. Thanks, guys, so much. See ya.
Thank
Peace.
you.
Thank you.